Something breaks quietly in a person before it ever shows on their face. For Chip Gaines, that breaking happened inside a doctor's office in late 2025, when the words Joanna's physicians spoke rearranged every plan, every project, and every version of the future the couple had spent years mapping out together. The man who had swung a sledgehammer through 2 decades of television, who had turned a struggling Waco flea market into a nationally recognized home renovation brand, who had laughed louder than anyone else in every room he ever entered, sat completely still. No humor, no instinct to charge forward. Nothing but his hand around Joanna's, and a silence heavy enough that everyone present understood something had permanently changed. Chip and Joanna Gaines had built their marriage and their media empire on momentum, and for most of their adult lives, that momentum had been enough to carry them through almost anything. From the moment Fixer Upper premiered on HGTV in 2013, they operated on a pace that most people couldn't sustain for a single year, let alone for 2 full decades. Filming, travel, renovations, children's events, book deadlines, Magnolia market openings, restaurant launches, and eventually their own television network on cable television, all of it running simultaneously while 5 children grew up watching their parents treat the calendar like a challenge to be won. And through all of it, the couple's partnership held, loud and relentless, and seemingly unbreakable. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, Joanna had been quietly managing something she didn't want to name out loud. Recurring pain that traced back to her 2022 back surgery. A fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to resolve. Symptoms she had spent months rationalizing as the natural cost of building something as large as the Magnolia brand had become. Stress and travel, and the physical demands of never stopping. None of those explanations held anymore. When doctors in late 2025 finally had answers, those answers changed the direction of everything. Fixer Upper Colorado Mountain House had just wrapped filming, which was the couple's first renovation outside of Texas and a milestone they had treated as the beginning of a new chapter in their careers. Their children had been involved. Ella had taken on her first real design role in the project. The whole renovation was framed as a personal space, somewhere for the family to gather during ski trips, something that felt intimate amid years of professional output. During filming, Joanna had moments where her energy disappeared without warning. Moments Chip had written off as exhaustion from the physical demands of the work. Watching her cry when she first saw the finished home had felt like a celebration at the time. Sitting in that doctor's office weeks later, Chip replayed the same moment with a completely different understanding of what she had actually been carrying. The Gaines family had been through public pressure before, real pressure that ran through entertainment news cycles and reshaped how their audience related to them. The years following their rise to fame had brought genuine controversy, criticism over their Magnolia Network branding, backlash from loyal Fixer-Upper fans who felt the couple had drifted from the show's original spirit, debates about wealth and relatability that surfaced regularly online. When Fixer-Upper Colorado Mountain House premiered in December 2025, the reaction on social media was fierce. Reddit threads calling the ski vacation home a project built for billionaires, commenters arguing that Joanna was overexposed, and that Chip's on-screen personality had grown too large for the format. Under any normal set of circumstances, Chip would have leaned into the noise, defended Joanna, pushed back with the same unfiltered confidence that had defined his public persona from the beginning. None of that happened. The criticism landed, and he left it completely unanswered, because not a single word of it touched what he was actually carrying. People who worked closely with Magnolia noticed the change before any explanation existed. The energy that had powered every meeting, every set, every public appearance had quietly left the room. Decisions Chip once made without hesitation began taking longer, and sometimes they stopped happening at all. During the press cycle for the Colorado series, the distraction behind his eyes showed through even when the humor was working. Fans assumed burnout from years of production. Nobody guessed that every time he looked at Joanna during those appearances, He was running a private calculation about how much more she could physically endure. His children were running their own quiet version of that same calculation. Drake, 20 years old and recently returned from college, had started coming home more frequently than his schedule required, drawn back without being asked. Ella set aside the professional momentum her Colorado design work had created, choosing instead to stay close to her mother and absorb the responsibility of that presence. Emmy started leaving handwritten notes around the kitchen, short and specific, placed where Joanna would find them without looking. And Crew, only 7, began asking the kinds of questions that small children ask when they sense something large hovering over the household, but can't yet form it into words. Questions that broke Chip's composure in ways that the adult conversations never quite did. He answered them as well as he could, which wasn't always well, because he was asking himself the same things. Behind every public appearance during this period, Chip was quietly dismantling the schedule that had defined his professional identity for 2 decades. Calendar items vanished without explanation. Magnolia meetings were pushed back and then canceled altogether. HGTV had been in early conversations about future projects, and those conversations stopped receiving responses. He told producers it was scheduling conflicts. He told business partners it was travel demands. The real explanation was simpler and heavier than any industry answer he could have offered. He had stopped caring about the next project, because the next project wasn't Joanna. Late nights found him at the kitchen table, replaying the same loop of memories, rushed dinners, early morning departures for filming, the times Joanna had said quietly that they were taking on too much. He didn't know whether slowing down sooner would have altered her diagnosis, and he suspected it probably wouldn't have, but the question stayed with him the way unfair questions do. What he understood with complete certainty was that he would not spend another year at the pace that had built Magnolia, not while she was navigating what the doctors had laid out for her. Joanna, for her part, asked life to continue as normally as possible and genuinely meant it. She didn't want the household to reorganize itself around her condition, didn't want to become the center of an adjusted gravity that she hadn't chosen. But the truth of how she was doing appeared in small ways that were impossible to miss if you were watching closely. And Chip was watching nothing else. The slower mornings, the way she steadied herself against the kitchen counter when her back pain deepened, the moments she believed no one was looking, when her hand moved to the section of her spine that had troubled her since before television ever found them, an old injury from her years as a cheerleader that had never fully healed, compounded now by surgery and time, and the physical demands of a life built on renovation work. She never complained. She didn't need to, because the evidence was already in the room. The morning Chip walked out of Magnolia Market on an ordinary weekday and realized he didn't know when he would return. He stood for a moment in the space that had become the physical heart of everything they built. The silos, the market that fans drove hours to visit, the bakery and the restaurant, and the brand that had grown from a shared instinct into a destination that showed up in travel guides. Standing inside all of that, he felt a distance from it that would have frightened him at any earlier point in his career. Now it simply confirmed what he had already decided. That same evening on the back porch of their home, the same place where their earliest plans had been spoken aloud years before, Chip told Joanna directly. He said he thought it was time to stop, all of it, and that he just wanted to be there. By early 2026, the decision had moved from private conversation to visible absence. Magnolia's executive team adjusted to a gap they hadn't prepared for. HGTV waited for a reversal that didn't come. Public appearances disappeared from his schedule. When the reason for the shift quietly reached people in industry circles, the tone of public commentary changed noticeably. Debates about wealth and relatability and whether the Gaines brand had lost its original spirit suddenly collapsed under their own weight, because the family was dealing with something that made all of it feel like a conversation about nothing. Inside the home, Joanna's treatment required more rest and more consistent support than she wanted to accept. And Chip became the person who made that acceptance easier without making it into a performance. He managed the children's schedules. He handled whatever she couldn't lift, literally and otherwise. He sat beside her through the difficult days without filling the silence with optimism she hadn't asked for. No audience, no camera, no brand attached to what he was doing. Just a husband who had made a decision about which role actually mattered. There were nights when Joanna told him she was sorry for altering the direction of everything they had built together. His answer never varied. He said there was nothing out there that came close to mattering as much as what was right there in front of him. Stepping away from the career didn't feel like loss to Chip. What it felt like was the first honest accounting he had done in years, a sorting of what was real from what had simply felt urgent for so long that urgency had started to resemble purpose. The network could find another renovation show. Magnolia could find another direction. But Joanna was not replaceable. And the years he had spent building away from her, chasing the next expansion before the current one had finished, were years he now understood he could not recover. Chip Gaines built his public identity on forward motion, on the conviction that the next project was always worth pursuing, and that any obstacle yielded to enough effort and stubbornness. What 2025 handed him, in the most difficult way available, was evidence that some things don't. His response was to stop moving, to sit still beside the person who needed him there, and to release without ceremony or reluctance the empire he had spent his entire adult life constructing, not as a sacrifice, not with the performance of grief, but quietly and with complete intention.